Welcome to the Explainer. So, you've heard the charge, right? Social Security is driving up the national debt. But what if that whole narrative is wrong? What if the program isn't the villain, but actually the victim? And what if it's been used to hide the real problem for the last 40 years?
You see this everywhere. The headlines, the political debates. It's a common story. Social Security, this bedrock program for millions of retirees, is bankrupting America. It's often painted as this out-of-control monster that we just can't afford anymore.
Okay, but let's really dig into that. Because when you look at how the system actually works, a totally different question pops up. Is Social Security really the one causing the fiscal mess? Or has it been the thing hiding the real fiscal mess all along?
To really get what's going on, we have to jump in the time machine and go back to 1983. A set of reforms were passed that year that completely changed the game, and honestly, this is where the whole story really kicks off.
So back in the early 80s, lawmakers looked ahead and saw this giant wave of baby boomers who would eventually retire, and they decided, pretty smartly, to get ahead of it. The plan was to start collecting more in payroll taxes than the system was paying out in benefits. The goal? To build up a massive surplus, a huge rainy day fund for the future.
So, where did all that extra money go? Well, it didn't just get stuffed into a mattress. Every single dollar of that surplus cash was sent over to the U.S. Treasury to be used for general government spending. And in return, the Social Security Trust Fund got what are essentially IOUs, special government bonds that promise to pay all that money back, with interest.
This whole process has a name. It's called commingling. And you've got to understand this to get the rest of the story. The surplus cash from your paycheck was mixed in with all the other money the government has. This basically turns Social Security into a giant internal bank for the rest of the federal government, funding everything from highways to the military.
Okay, now here's where things get really interesting. This massive ongoing loan from Social Security started to create a kind of optical illusion in the federal budget. It started to mask what was really going on with government spending.
For decades, when you heard about the deficit, you were likely hearing about something called the unified budget deficit. But here's the trick. That number took the real deficit from general spending and then subtracted Social Security's surplus. Poof, the deficit looked smaller. The number that showed the underlying reality was the on-budget deficit, which showed how much the government was really overspending before Social Security's loan bailed it out.
And here is the absolute kicker. If you look at that on-budget number, the true financial picture, the government's general fund has been in the red almost every single year since 1983. It was pretty much always spending more than it took in from taxes, and it was using that Social Security surplus as a credit card to cover the difference.
Actually, the only time the government's general fund was paying its own bills was for just 3 short years, from 1999 to 2001. And that happened after a period of tax increases and some serious spending restraint. This little blip of black ink proves a crucial point. Relying on the Social Security piggy bank wasn't inevitable, it was a choice.
But you can only borrow from a piggy bank for so long, right? Eventually, the bill comes due. As those baby boomers started to retire in big numbers, the day finally came when Social Security had to say to the Treasury, hey, we need that money back now.
So this happened in stages. The first big moment was in 2010. For the first time, Social Security needed to start cashing in the interest it had earned on those IOUs just to pay all its benefits. Then, in 2021, the next shoe dropped. It had to start cashing in the IOUs themselves, the principal. The Treasury now had to start paying back the actual money it had been borrowing for decades.
And this, right here, is the absolute core of the whole argument. The budget pressure we're seeing today isn't because Social Security suddenly became unsustainable. It's because the Treasury's General Fund finally has to repay the 40-year loan it took from the Social Security Trust Fund. The creditor is just calling in its debt.
So all of this leads to a pretty provocative conclusion that the source material presents, that this whole setup, whether it was on purpose or not, basically worked like a giant 40-year-long fiscal shell game.
And listen, this wasn't some big secret nobody knew about. People were sounding the alarm for years. Critics like Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan were calling it out way back in the late 1980s. He flat out said Congress was raiding the trust fund to make their own books look better.
So the argument goes that this created a kind of hidden wealth transfer. Think about it like this. Step 1, you collect a payroll tax that hits working and middle-class folks the hardest. Step 2, you use the surplus from that tax to provide political cover, to make the real deficit look way smaller than it is. And step 3, You use that cover to justify big tax cuts that mainly benefit corporations and the very wealthy.
And the source points to this clear pattern over decades. You see major tax cuts under Presidents Reagan, George W. Bush, and Trump. Each time they cut the revenue going into the government's general fund. The argument is that the artificially healthy-looking budget, propped up by Social Security's money, made those tax cuts seem a lot more affordable than they actually were.
Let's just put it bluntly. The argument being laid out here is that working-class and middle-class Americans were, through their payroll taxes, essentially forced to lend the government money, and that loan made it politically possible for the government to then turn around and cut taxes on the wealthiest people and corporations.
So it all brings us back to that one big framing question. Is Social Security the problem here, this massive, unaffordable program that's bankrupting the nation? Or is it something else entirely? Is it simply the creditor finally knocking on the door to collect on a 40-year loan that the rest of the government spent a long, long time ago?